So, have you ever wondered what really happens when a limited liability partnership, an LLP, gets into financial trouble and needs to make a deal with its creditors or partners? It's not as simple as just shaking hands. Nope, there's a very strict legal dance involved, and today we're going to break down every single step.
Okay, let's just dive right in. Picture this, an LLP really needs to reach a compromise to stay afloat. But how do you make that deal official, legally binding so it actually sticks? Well, we are about to walk through that entire high-stakes journey, from just a proposal on paper to a final court order. And it all kicks off with a very formal invitation.
So, our story begins with the most crucial first step, officially calling the meeting. And this isn't about sending a quick calendar invite. This is a formal legal process to make sure every single person is properly informed. The first question to answer is, who's actually in charge of sending out the notice? While the whole process is overseen by a legal authority called the tribunal, think of them as the referee. Their first job is to appoint a chairman for the meeting. And from there, it's usually that chairman, or sometimes the LLP itself, who gets the job of sending that official notice to every single creditor or partner involved.
Now, timing is absolutely everything here. The notice has to be sent out by post at least 21 clear days before the meeting is scheduled. And let me be clear, that's not a suggestion, it's a hard deadline. It's designed to give everyone plenty of time to really dig into the proposal and get ready.
And listen, we're not talking about a simple invitation card. The package that gets sent out is, well, it's chunky. It has to include a full copy of the proposed deal, a statement where the designated partners have to disclose any personal financial stake they might have, and super importantly, a proxy form. This is all about total transparency and making sure people can vote even if they can't physically be in the room.
Okay, so the notices are out, but the work is far from over. A whole new phase of preparation kicks off now. This part is all about hitting some really critical deadlines to make sure the meeting itself is totally legit and legally sound.
Think of this as the pre-meeting checklist. Before anyone can even walk into that room, there are these key administrative hurdles. Documents have to be ready to go on request, legal proof that the notice went out has to be filed, and any of those proxy votes need to be submitted officially. Every single step is a safeguard to protect the integrity of the process.
And here's a really important rule about access to information. Any creditor or partner who has a right to be at that meeting can demand their own copy of the compromise plan, and the LLP is legally required to hand it over for free within 48 hours. No excuses.
So remember that proxy form we mentioned? It's what lets someone vote for you if you can't make it. But for that vote to actually count, the signed form has to be delivered to the LLP's registered office at least 48 hours before the meeting starts. It's a strict cutoff, and it's there for a good reason. It gives them time to verify everything.
Now, this next part is a huge deal for keeping everything above board. The chairman has to formally swear to the tribunal, using a legal document called an affidavit, that all the rules for sending notices and advertising the meeting have been followed to the letter. This has to happen at least 7 days before the meeting, and it's the official proof that the whole process has been fair and transparent so far.
All right, all the prep work is done, the meeting happens, and the votes are cast. But hold on, we're not at the finish line yet. Now, the result of that vote has to be formally and very accurately reported back to the tribunal.
And man, things move fast after the vote. The chairman has just 1 week, 7 days, to get the results to the tribunal. And if the compromise got approved, the LLP gets another 7 days to formally ask the tribunal to confirm the whole deal. You can't lose momentum here. This report isn't just a simple yes or no. Oh no, it is a super detailed breakdown for the tribunal. It has to show exactly who was there, how they voted, whether in person or by proxy, and, this is crucial, the financial value that each of those votes represents. And this is the big one. The threshold for approval is really high. It's not enough to get a simple majority of people to say yes. For the compromise to actually pass, it has to be approved by members who represent at least 3/4 of the total value. Why so high? Well, it makes sure any deal has massive support, and it prevents folks with a big financial stake from being steamrolled by a lot of smaller players. It's about the weight of your vote, not just the number of hands in the air. So the plan got the votes, the report is filed, and now the whole thing enters the final legal arena. The tribunal takes center stage to review everything and decide whether or not to give its official, legally binding stamp of approval.
You can think of this as a fork in the road. If the compromise was approved, the LLP goes to the tribunal and asks for confirmation. But if it failed, the process for this specific deal just stops. The tribunal then steps in to figure out what happens next based on that failure.
But the tribunal doesn't just rubber stamp these things. Before they give their final blessing, they do one last deep dive. They have to be totally satisfied that the LLP has been completely honest about everything. All the important facts, its most recent financial situation, and any investigations that might be going on. It's all about making sure the decision was based on the full, unvarnished truth.
And here we are, the grand finale. The tribunal has reviewed the entire case and it has made its decision. This is the moment where the arrangement goes from being a plan to a legally binding reality that's going to impact everyone involved.
Once the tribunal issues that order, it is not a suggestion. It is final. It's an enforceable decision that is legally binding on every single creditor, every partner, and the LLP itself, and it doesn't matter how they voted. This is the point where the compromise effectively becomes law for everybody.
But wait, we're almost there. There is one last absolutely critical piece of paperwork. The LLP has 30 days to file the tribunal's order with the registrar, who's basically the official government record keeper. And this is key. The compromise only officially takes effect after that filing is done. Getting it on the public record is what makes it all real.
So, when you step back and look at this whole thing, what's the big takeaway? This entire, super detailed procedure, from the 21-day notice to that 3/4 value vote, all the way to the final filing, it's all designed for one reason: to create a structured, transparent, and fair path to a legally solid solution. It's a system built from the ground up to protect everyone's interests when the stakes are at their absolute highest.
Ever wonder what happens when a business partnership really hits the rocks? Not just a small disagreement, but serious, deep financial trouble. Well, today we're diving into the legal journey of a limited liability partnership, or LLP, as it teeters on the edge of ruin. All right, here's our game plan. We're going to start where the trouble begins, walk through the formal process of asking for a second chance, and see how it all leads to a final binding verdict. Let's get into it. So, every story has a beginning, right? For a struggling LLP, what's that one moment, that tipping point that sets this whole legal machine in motion? You know, it's not as simple as just having a bad sales month. The law, and we're talking specifically about Rule 12I, is very precise. It lays out 3 very distinct scenarios that can officially kick this whole revival process off. And what's really fascinating here is that this whole thing can get started in a few different ways. It could be creditors who are just fed up because they haven't been paid. It could be an existing court case that's already trying to dissolve the company. Or, get this, it can even be triggered because a court-appointed liquidator didn't do their paperwork on time. So yeah, the pressure can come from pretty much anywhere. So boom, one of those triggers gets pulled and now we're officially in the game. At this point, the LLP itself, a major creditor, or even one of the partners can go to the legal tribunal, think of it as a special court for business problems, and formally apply for a revival plan. But you can't just show up empty-handed. Yeah, this isn't some fill-in-the-blanks form. Rule 3513 makes it very clear. You need to bring a whole package to the table. We're talking about your financial statements to show just how bad things are, a really detailed plan for how you're going to turn things around, and you even have to suggest a neutral person to oversee the whole thing. And listen, there's a real sense of urgency built right into this process. Time is money, right? Especially when a business is sinking. So the clock starts ticking. You've got only 90 days from that first demand notice to file your application. And once you do, the tribunal has to get everyone together within 60 days. The system is designed for speed. Okay, so let's say the tribunal looks at everything and says, all right, there might be a shot here. They admit the case. And this is where a brand new, super important person enters the scene. The LLP administrator. So who is this administrator? Well, you can think of them as the court's own project manager for this whole turnaround. They're not rooting for the LLP, and they're not rooting for the creditors. They are a totally impartial pro, picked from a special government list, and their only job is to manage this revival process by the book, exactly how the tribunal says. And make no mistake, this administrator isn't calling all the shots on their own. Nope. They report directly to the tribunal. The court decides how much they get paid, the court can fire them if there's a good reason, and the court will find a replacement if they need to. It keeps everything under tight judicial control. All right, so the administrator is in place. What's their first big move? They have to take that revival plan to the people who are owed the most money, the creditors. And this, right here, is the make or break moment. It's the ultimate reality check. For this revival plan to go anywhere, it needs a thumbs up from creditors who hold at least 3/4, that's 75%, of the LLP's total debt.
If you can't convince the people you owe money to that your plan is solid, well, it's pretty much dead in the water.
And guess what? The clock is ticking again. As soon as the creditors cast their votes, the administrator gets just 60 days to wrap it all up in a report for the tribunal. Then, the tribunal gets another 60 days to make the final call. The system is designed to avoid leaving everyone hanging in limbo.
So picture this. The report from the administrator, with that crucial creditor vote, lands on the tribunal's desk. This is it, the final act. And it can only go one of two ways. At the end of the day, the tribunal has all the power. If the creditors said yes and the plan looks solid, the tribunal can give it the official green light and oversee the comeback. But if the creditors shut it down, or if the tribunal just doesn't buy it, they can bring down the hammer and order the LLP to be wound up. That's the legal term for shutting the doors for good. But hold on, the tribunal's job isn't over just with that big decision. The law is also incredibly strict about following all the rules, even the small stuff. So what happens if an LLP gets its revival plan approved, but then messes up on some of the basic paperwork?
Well, that's where this number comes in. 1 lakh rupees. That is the maximum fine for a very specific but really important mistake. It's a big enough number to make sure everyone pays attention to the details.
So what's the fine for? It's all about filing the paperwork. See, once the tribunal issues its big order, the LLP is legally required to file that order with the official registrar. It's a crucial step. Section 64 says if you drop the ball on that, both the LLP as a company and every single one of its designated partners could be on the hook for that penalty. It's a serious reminder that in the eyes of the law, every step matters.
All right, let's get right into it. When you think about a limited liability partnership, or LLP, what really keeps it on the straight and narrow? Today, we're going to walk through the whole accountability playbook, starting with the basic rights of a single partner and going all the way up to a full-blown government probe. So here's the roadmap. We'll kick things off with the foundation, what a partner can actually do with their stake in the company. Then, we'll look at what happens when an LLP starts to slack on its duties. After that, things get serious as we dive into how a special tribunal can step in to save a failing LLP. From there, we escalate to the ultimate level of scrutiny, a formal investigation. And finally, we'll answer the big question: who ends up paying for all of this? Okay, so let's start at square one. What does it actually mean to be a partner in an LLP? What are your rights? What do you own? And maybe most importantly, what can you do with it? So, Section 42 of the LLP Act lays it all out pretty clearly. A partner's rights are mostly about the money. You have a right to your share of the profits, losses, and any payouts. And the key thing is, those rights are transferable. Think of it like this. You can sell your financial interest, your piece of the pie, to someone else. And this is where it gets really interesting. The person you transfer your rights to, they get the financial upside, for sure. They get the share of profits and distributions. But, and this is a big but, they have absolutely no voice in managing the business. They can't show up to meetings and start making decisions. Why? It's all about stability. This setup ensures the business can keep running smoothly without being disrupted every time a financial stake changes hands. Okay, that's the individual side of things, but what about the LLP as a whole? What happens if it doesn't do its basic homework, like filing required documents with the government? Well, that's when the first real layer of oversight kicks in. The process here is pretty straightforward, almost non-nonsense. If an LLP misses a filing deadline, the registrar doesn't just send a polite email. They can go straight to the tribunal. The tribunal then issues a formal order telling the LLP, hey, you need to fix this, and you have until this date to do it. It's a simple but really effective way to make sure LLPs are being transparent. But, what happens when it's not just about late paperwork? What if the whole business is on the brink of collapse? This is where the tribunal's role gets way bigger. It's not just about enforcing rules anymore. It's about trying to rescue the entire company. When the tribunal approves a rescue plan, the order it issues is incredibly detailed. You can really think of it as a full-blown recovery plan. It spells out exactly who the LLP administrator is and what they can do. It sets hard deadlines for every action. It gives specific instructions to everyone involved, from the partners to the creditors. It's basically the blueprint for survival, with zero room for confusion. And they are not messing around with the timing. The administrator gets a hard cap of 180 days to get the whole plan implemented and report back. That's it. This pressure is crucial because let's be real, when a company is struggling, every single day counts. And as soon as that order is issued, another clock starts ticking. The administrator has just 30 days to get a certified copy filed with the registrar. This is super important because it makes the whole revival plan official and public, so all the stakeholders know exactly what's going on. This really shows you just how powerful the tribunal is, especially during something as complicated as a merger. It can literally order property and debts to move from one LLP to another. It can make sure lawsuits don't get stuck in limbo. It can even dissolve an old LLP quickly without a long, drawn-out process. And crucially, it has to make sure anyone who disagrees with the plan is treated fairly. It's like giving the tribunal a complete surgical kit to perform some really complex corporate operations.
And of course, to make sure everyone follows these orders, there are some serious financial consequences. If that order from the tribunal isn't filed on time, the LLP itself and every single designated partner can get hit with a hefty fine. It's a clear message. This is not optional.
Okay, so we've covered the small stuff and the big life-saving interventions. But what if there's something more, well, sinister going on? What if there's a suspicion of fraud or major misconduct? That's when we hit the final boss level of oversight, a formal investigation by the central government. So the big question is, what actually pulls the trigger for this kind of top-level investigation? It's not something that happens lightly. The bar is set pretty high, and the reasons have to be very specific. See, this is the key. The government doesn't really have a choice here. The law says the central government must appoint an inspector if a court or the tribunal says so. This can happen because the tribunal decides on its own or because at least a fifth of the partners get together and apply for it. This is huge because it takes the decision out of the political realm and makes it a mandatory legal response to a serious concern. All right, so these investigations, they're not cheap. They're complicated, they take time, and that brings up a really practical question. Who actually pays for all of this? So here's how it works. The government fronts the cash to get the ball rolling, but it's not a free ride. After the investigation, the government gets that money back from the LLP or whoever is found responsible. And if they don't cough it up, the government can go after that money with the same force they'd use to collect overdue property taxes. That's serious. And check this out. This is a really clever part of the law. It's called a first charge. And what that means is basically the government gets paid back first. If the investigation recovers any money or property, the government's expenses are the very first thing to be paid out from that recovery, before anyone else sees a dime. It's designed to make sure taxpayers aren't left holding the bag.